Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of KDM, which stands for Kit Dimitri Movies. And I, along with my good friend, colleague, and host with the most, Kit
Oh,
Bowen of the Movie Cast, co-host, host at the most. It's all equal. How are you? Hi, Kit.
I'm good. I'm good. I love talking to you every day. So
Yeah, this has been fun. We have this is a special episode.
it is.
We're all sitting down to talk with Kit for her. No. And it's a two-parter. No.
Live on a cliffhanger.
Um no, it's a special episode, for lack of better words. It's what in the publication world they would call maybe a think piece.
Yes.
But
Opinion.
it's something, an opinion article, a think piece, and it's something that while we've been at the movies together, we've talked about this. And I think what spurred it is this past summer, we've had two relatively big movies come out that have had in them what would be considered movie stars. And they were definitely movie stars of the day. And to an extent, they continue to be movie stars today because they haven't lost that luster, so to speak. The movies I'm talking about, of course, are Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Harrison Ford, and then, of course, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, which stars Tom Cruise. And the thesis, so what we're going to talk about today is, has Hollywood lost its magic in creating movie stars of today? Because our conversation was, it started off, who today, excluding people such as Tom Cruise, such as Harrison Ford, such as even Tom Hanks, excluding those people because they've had careers
Right.
in the 80s and they've built it. They were already movie stars. But today, we want to explore that question because, and to do that, Kit, I think the best way to do it is we have to have a simple definition of what is a movie star.
Right.
The simple definition, and I looked this up, believe it or not, is it's actor or actress who is famous for playing leading roles, and that to me is the key word,
Right.
in movies.
Right.
Now, for me, like I said, it's roles, as in plural.
Mhm.
And I'm going to throw into that, I'm going to add to this definition. I hope Webster's doesn't get upset. It's an actor or actress who's gained fame from playing more than just one recurring character and has generated a fan base that will see said actor or actress in movies outside of what that person may have become famous for. So when you look at Tom Cruise, obviously he's made more movies than just the Mission Impossible movies. In fact, he rarely was in a sequel in the 80s and 90s that I can even think of. Right. And
Yeah.
I can't even think of him doing sequels. It took how many years for Top Gun to be a sequel? But the man was in, Risky Business, The Outsiders. Of course,
Risky Business
Top Gun.
really put him on.
Risky Business, and his dance and his tighty whities is what really brought him to fame. And then, of course, Top Gun, and he was in movies like Days of Thunder. And then he began working with people like Martin Scorsese. And then he was in Rain Man and worked with Oliver Stone and Born on the 4th of July. And he was legit a star. And he hung around with stars like Paul Newman and such. Harrison Ford, same thing. Yes, you could say he was Han Solo. Yes, he's Indiana Jones, and he even was lucky. I mean, this guy was a Chaza, as they say in Yiddish. I mean, he was Jack Ryan. So this guy had three.
Yeah.
But then he was also in The Fugitive.
Yep.
He was also in Air Force One, Witness, Blade Runner. He was in so many, Presumed Innocent. He was in movies that people went to. It was during a time where people would say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go see that Harrison Ford movie, or even Eddie Murphy. Eddie
Yep.
Murphy, 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, which became a franchise because of the success. And even there was a sequel to 48 Hours, and then The Golden Child, and then Coming to America.
Yep.
You know, I mean, Eddie Murphy became a huge movie star. A lot of people forget Michael Douglas was $100 million man too. Like this guy, not only was he a great actor, but he produced. You know, I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he produced.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, Romancing the Stone, Disclosure, Fatal Attraction,
Yep.
Basic Instinct, which catapulted who else? Um, Sharon Stone.
Yeah, sort of. But you also
Sort
have
of.
like the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. You have the Sylvester
The
Stallone.
Stallone. Mhm.
Have and even I would even
Bruce
throw
Willis.
Bruce Willis and Michael J. Fox. So
Oh, hell yeah.
those were movie stars.
They were movie stars, and I would go.
And it, interestingly enough, as far as the male, we've mostly just mentioned male movie stars, but interestingly enough, they usually are tied around an action type film. Or
They can be, but when you look at somebody like a Meryl Streep,
yeah,
who made her
because now
bones,
we have to talk about on the women's side. Meryl
right?
Streep
But when you go
is
to
absolutely a movie star. You'd go
right,
to the movie because of Meryl Streep, basically.
100%, and she did it all.
Yep.
That woman did it all. I mean,
sure
when
did.
I was at Universal, when I worked at Universal, we had the River Wild, Death Becomes Her, that she started with
I mean,
Goldie
she did
Hawn,
comedy, she did the action. Yeah. Wow.
she could do it all.
Streep.
You know, Molly Ringwald, you know, the Brat Pack, as they call them, you know, they had those movies that did well for those audiences. Oh, Julia Roberts, who actually, you know, she didn't do, you know, she was a Mystic Pizza. And then, of course, it was Pretty Woman that catapulted her. And whatever she was in thereafter, people just followed her and they fell in love with her. Flatliners.
Yeah, they went to see a movie because of Julia Roberts.
Because of Julia Roberts.
The definition right now is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
In the day, way back in the day, the studios, the studios would basically create a movie star. They would take someone and create a movie star from them and base a lot of their films around that person, like a Marilyn Monroe or a Cary Grant or anybody of that age, Judy Garland, all of them,
Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. That
was what studios used as their linchpins. They knew if they released a Marilyn Monroe movie, it was gonna make money. And everyone went to see a movie because of that particular star. Jimmy Stewart, Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. These are you knew what you were getting into. You knew what you were going to the movie for.
Right.
And now and that it has carried through. It really has carried through from the
carried through for a long time. The golden age of Hollywood. Because you wanted to see, but the thing is too, what was cultivated was first there was a movie. Okay. It's like, okay, Eddie Murphy, he was very popular in Saturday Night Live. Same can be said for John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd to an extent, right? John Belushi was really popular in Saturday Night Live, and then this movie came out that he was in it for a little bit called Animal House, and that catapulted him, as well as Chevy Chase, who had his career at Saturday Night Live. Then they put him together with Goldie Hawn for Foul Play. Seems like old times. And then, of course, he gets his Vacation movie. I mean, he was a star for a while, but it was one movie. So focusing, say, like on Ed, right?
Interesting that SNL has churned out movie stars, comedy movie stars, because if you think you got it now, it's like Will Ferrell. I mean, he certainly came out of that, and you went to see a movie with him in it, knowing what you were going to get. I think SNL has definitely, as far as the comedy world, they definitely
100%,
Yeah.
100%. But and when you
Bill
look at somebody
Murray.
like Eddie
Gosh,
Murphy,
Bill
Bill
Murray.
Murray, Bill Murray. I mean, if Bill Murray again, though, looking at a Bill Murray, and when Ivan Reitman put him in Meatballs, right? Nobody knew. I mean, nobody knew how Animal House was going to do. Nobody, pardon me, knew how Meatballs was going to do, or 48 Hours.
Yep.
They didn't know how these movies are going to do. And then when they kind of hit, and people were like, oh my God, Eddie Murphy is so funny. And then shortly thereafter, they left SNL, and they Hollywood started creating projects around them.
Yeah.
And then Ivan Reitman would work with Bill Murray. Stripes really catapulted him, right? And then, of course, Ghostbusters. And then you had Dan Aykroyd. But when you look at John Belushi, I mean, that man, too, between and this is a guy, too, he also worked with like Steven Spielberg as well as Dan Aykroyd. I mean, these people, name directors wanted these people in their movies, and they packaged them. And that's another thing that really doesn't happen today. A lot of movies were packaged. Okay, we want to make a Tom Cruise movie.
Right.
Or so Simpson and Bruckheimer, oh, we got Days of Thunder. Put him in that. And Days of Thunder, a movie about stock car racing, NASCAR, was a huge hit.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise. And then Scorsese's like, I'm going to put him in The Color of Money. What's that? Well, it's kind of a sequel to The Hustler. What's The Hustler? Nobody really, I mean, The Hustler's a classic in its own right.
Yeah.
We're going to pit him against Paul Newman. And he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom Hanks, Bachelor Party, Splash. Look at the movies.
Yeah, Tom Hanks definitely falls into that. And it's funny how it does progress through the decades. So,
right.
We just mentioned Paul Newman. So in the 70s, when movies were being made, and they were, except for maybe the Jawses and the Star Wars that changed the landscape, you have these gritty crime dramas.
They were gritty, or not happy endings,
or things like that. So you had Paul Newman, you had Robert Redford, you had, of these 70 stars who, Robert De Niro, you had, they were the stars of that time. And then, as it progresses,
Al Pacino,
Gene, well, not really Gene Hackman, because
Gene Hackman.
He fronted films. He was still kind of a character actor,
Yeah, but he was in a lot of movies that like people knew Gene Hackman.
And
I met Gene Hackman, but oh my God, Clint! You have to mention Clint Eastwood, because this is a guy that, when you talk about longevity in a movie star, the Dirty Harry thing for him was amazing. But as a director, especially after Play Misty for Me. He would star in the movies he directed. So like you had, Every Which Way But Loose, which shouldn't have worked at all, works, right? And then all the other movies that he made, that he made, Escape from Alcatraz, and he found people that he loved to work with, but they were movie stars. People would go, oh, I'm going to that Clint Eastwood movie, or I'm going to another star too that came out late 80s, early 90s, was Denzel Washington.
Yes.
He got critical acclaim in the movies that he did, like The Mighty Quinn, and people gravitated. Critics gave him praise. His movies did pretty well, and people would gravitate to them. So they would build movies. They would find movies for these actors in hopes that audience would click. Look, Beverly Hills Cop wouldn't have been the same movie as it was originally intended for Sylvester Stallone, who at the time was a star in his own right.
Yeah.
But when they let him go, because he was doing too many script changes, and they decided to go comedy, and they get Martin Brest, they get Eddie Murphy, it's movie magic. And Paramount knew. And it was a time when nobody said, yeah, this Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, do you think we can get 6 movies out of it? No, it's like, we're hoping we get 1 movie.
Right.
And then the movie hits, then they announced a sequel. And they said there's going to be a sequel to Beverly Hills Cop. Nobody thought 48 Hours would do, what it did, and it made him a star. And then John Landis, who knew how to work with some people, including Eddie Murphy. Would you look at Trading Places, who had a great cast?
I know.
Him, Dan Aykroyd, Jamie Lee Curtis, another person. Even John Travolta to an extent. This guy, after Grease,
yes, no, he
exploded.
Was a for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would make not so good movies good. Like
people would still go see him.
Yeah, like Perfect isn't a perfect movie, but
the
people
box office draw is what
to
be.
Box office draw.
So then, Dimitri, when did it all change?
When did it all change? That's really interesting, because I think it's when Hollywood started focusing more on IP. I mean, I hate to say it was when they
making superhero movies.
They were afraid of risk, and they focused more on. And here's the difference: back in the day, Hollywood would create the IP. Beverly Hills Cop, like those movies, Top Gun, all those movies, they were never IP. Presumed Innocent, based off of a book. Okay, maybe not the best example.
But Air Force One. I mean,
Air Force One.
Rambo,
right. Well, Rambo is based off a book.
Rocky.
But again, Rocky.
Terminator.
Terminator.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it's like Hollywood created IPs.
Yes.
Like
yes.
they would say, this is a really good movie. Let's see if it works. And they would take the risk. Now, the budgets weren't the same as they are today, but I would argue that from an inflation standpoint, the budgets back then, it was still a risk to make a movie like a Terminator movie, and to give somebody like James Cameron, who, his feature film debut, he was actually fired off of, that was Piranha 2. So
yeah,
you look at what he does, Cameron, with somebody like Linda Hamilton, Sigourney Weaver.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right. Another one.
Absolutely put Sigourney in there as a
100%. And then Harrison Ford goes into like Working Girl with Melanie Griffith.
Yeah.
Which also starred Sigourney Weaver. Yeah. You would make these package movies, and they would package the actor, the director. Who misses the soundtrack? They would package the music, like Top Gun and such. So, it's Hollywood's fear of risk, and we've got to go big. So, had Iron Man not worked out, things I think might have been a little bit different in Hollywood. But Iron Man was a huge hit, and then it was all about IP. Disney.
But actually, to be honest, if we go further back, really Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002, that's when it's, if you actually, you're going to go way back, Richard Donner's Superman, of course, was always considered a cult classic, but it didn't make Christopher Reeve a major star. It didn't.
No, but and he always talked about that, but it gave him a career because he was in movies like Somewhere in Time. He was in Death Trap, opposite Michael Caine. Great movie, by the ways, folks. So please, try to remember the movies that we recommend, because you can find these. But Christopher Reeves, albeit not as big as say Superman, he still continued to get work.
Oh yeah,
and people still liked him. They loved him as Superman.
Go see a movie because Christopher Reeve was in it,
right?
It was Superman. That's what Superman. And then there was, then all of a sudden the studio said, "Oh, hey, let's start making more of these." And then Spider-Man. I really feel like Spider-Man is what blew it all up.
See, I don't, because at that time, studios were still making original kind of movies.
They were.
They weren't.
They saw how well it was doing.
Yeah, and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man did great. No argument, but I really think that it was this crop of Marvel movies, in which look at that point, the Marvel movies were released by Paramount, and Fox had some under their belt. They had Fantastic Four, But Disney started buying up IPs. They bought Lucasfilms, they bought Marvel, they bought Pixar. But a lot of the studios today, it's hard to make a movie where they just release one movie. Let's see how it does. And if the movie hits with an audience, they will greenlight a sequel, but they'll take that actor and put him into something else, or her, and see if it works. Jennifer Lawrence, to an extent, was part of that system.
Yeah.
She's a very gifted actress. But again, I think, I'm not blaming Hunger Games. I know a lot of people like the Hunger Games. But she was in those Russell movies, like what was an American Hustle. So and those movies, well, then she had that chemistry with Bradley Cooper, who's another one that, who's making his way. And then he's in this movie called The Hangover,
right,
which he exploded, and for a short time.
But they're still not really movie stars.
No, it was short.
I don't say to myself, oh, I got to go see this movie because Bradley Cooper's in it.
Right.
Nowadays, it is about the IP. It is absolutely. So for me, a Marvel movie is something I'm going to want to go see. I what I like about the Marvel movies, though, is that they do incorporate great stars to be in them, because you've got Chris.
Yeah, but anybody could do it.
Chris Evans, and you've got Chris Hemsworth, and you like them, and
sure,
they make the movies the way if they weren't in the movies, then the movies wouldn't be great. So, but it's not. And Anthony Mackie, Anthony Mackie. Once
I was gonna go. Speaking of like the actors, Anthony Mackie at a 2018 Comic-Con, and this is a quote from him. There are no movie stars anymore. Anthony Mackie isn't a movie star. The Falcon is a movie star. The evolution of the superhero has meant the death of the movie star. And I don't disagree with him, because I believe that today people are so superhero heavy. They don't care who's under the mask. Like, they're actually like rooting for laundry. They're rooting for a costume. It doesn't matter who's in the costume. That's what they're rooting for. And it's kind of like, as opposed to when the studio would depend on the star to open up a movie, now they're depending on the IP. Like, the IP has become a star, and that is so you can't interview an IP. An IP can't go out and do promotion like for the movie. Like, it's just an IP. It's the intellectual property. And nobody says, "Ooh, I'm gonna go see a Chris Evans movie." And he's a gifted actor. Let's he was in a movie called Gifted. Did you ever see that movie? Small little indie film. It's a really good movie. I had hoped that it would have done better. Maybe in the 80s it would have, but it didn't. I can't credit him for Knives Out, because that was an amazing ensemble. That's an amazing ensemble. But another movie that, like, American Pie was a movie that nobody thought was going to do well, and that movie exploded. Now Hollywood tried with Jason Biggs, Allison Hannigan, Sean, what's his name?
Sean Williams.
Yeah. So, but it's too bad when, I miss the days when Hollywood used to create their own IPs, when they would put something out that audiences would gravitate to, and it would hit, and they would go, all right, let's make a sequel. And then once that word got out, because so many people loved the first one, it garnered excitement for when the second one came out, because there's a comfort in sequels. I don't knock sequels. We shouldn't knock sequels, because there is somewhat of a comfort. But remember, sometimes that sequel came from something that was original, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Nobody expected that.
What's interesting. So I don't necessarily miss the movie star thing. I don't. But
I do.
I don't think it's necessarily that they're not creating, studios may not be creating IP, but they're filmmakers who are. So James Cameron, for example, he has created several IPs, including Avatar and Terminator and, Aliens and all that. So I think nowadays, for me, when I say I want to go see a movie, I want to go see a movie because of a filmmaker I enjoy. Hence, Christopher Nolan. He's a filmmaker that we want to watch. Wes Anderson is a filmmaker I enjoy. Cameron, I mean, I like his movies too. Spielberg and all of those, they're all still vibrant and still very much a part of the conversation. Scorsese. I mean, you now say, oh, I'm going to go see a movie because it's directed by Scorsese.
But do you think a lot of people do that? I mean, I'm with you but I'm with you because I used to do that in the 70s and 80s. So especially after Jaws, right? Oh my God, Close Encounters. Oh, that's Steven Spielberg's next movie. I gotta go see it. So yes, there was a time when a filmmaker built his own aura. Brian De Palma used to be the same with Francis Ford Coppola. You'd say, oh, Francis Ford Coppola is doing Dracula. Wow, that's fantastic. Oh, well, what's this apocalypse now? And then George Lucas kind of got out of the game. He would produce some movies. But yes, you would go to a filmmaker. James Cameron's a perfect example. He
Ridley
made
Scott. I mean,
Ridley Scott. Schwarzenegger is a star, a movie star.
Yes,
he was a movie star, and he had the fortune of not only working with James Cameron, but again, going back to Ivan Reitman. Ivan Reitman said, you know what? This guy could be funny in a movie.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to put him in like a Kindergarten Cop, and then I'm going to put him up against Danny DeVito, who was a star at the time. We're going to put him in Twins. And so let's see how he does in comedy. And each movie was a hit.
Oh, 100.
And so, but why? People like the movie, but they love to see him in it.
Yeah.
He could carry, that's the term, he could carry a movie, or she could carry a movie. And Julia Roberts could carry a movie.
Oh, yeah. So yes, I guess the idea of that is kind of faded, but in your opinion, who today could actually carry a movie besides the people that are already still movie stars like Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise?
It's really tough because I don't use it in the same way. All right, so like Matt Damon can carry a movie for sure. But then I look at a movie earlier this year that came out, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That girl, name escapes me, but the lead little actress there, the 12-year-old, she could carry a movie. She's not a star, but she carried the movie, but again, like I credit casting and I credit the director for pulling out a great performance and having that person carry a movie. When you look at
Leonardo DiCaprio, do you think he can carry a movie?
I mean, yes. And let's face it, after Titanic, I mean, look, this guy was in like Basketball Diaries. He was with De Niro. He was already being paid attention to.
Yes.
And then Titanic hits, right? And what's his next movie after Titanic? The Beach. Now, The Beach didn't do what Titanic did, but no movie did. So it's not fair. But The Beach did okay because those girls went to go see it. Now, there is this thing about the pop music world. And it's funny, I was reminded of it today. I was rewatching Dunkirk. I'm in a Christopher Nolan thing. And I'd forgotten that Harry Styles was in the movie. Yeah. And I saw that movie with my friend Paul, and we're in the theater and we were wondering, why the hell are there so many like teenage girls in this audience? And then it was after I said, oh, this Harry Styles kid, they loved him.
Yes. And certainly like Twilight, which was IP.
Sure, I totally.
It made stars of, well, mostly Robert Pattinson. I mean,
but Did it though? I mean, if he didn't have, okay, so he's in Twilight. He did some indie movies. Now, I'm not going to take away the fact that Pattinson's a talented actor, nor Kristen Stewart for that matter. But up until like Batman, what movies, like people weren't, those teenagers didn't follow him when he did other types of movies. And I also think that sometimes actors like the studios don't want to take a risk and maybe go into a broad comedy, because today it's kind of hard. But I think that today it's become very turnkey. So Hollywood's kind of gotten lazy, and instead of attaching a star to a movie, they attach an already popular IP to an actor.
Right.
But then that actor can grow old, and then somebody else can come in and replace it. You know, a great example though, I mean, and it's lasted over 50 years, like James Bond. James Bond has survived, and you know, and it's really at this point not necessarily an IP. And I think that Daniel Craig has proven that yes, people are going to pay attention to, like they'll go, oh yeah, Daniel Craig, James Bond, and he's been in some other, Logan Lucky, he was fantastic in that, and he's definitely got and you know, if you don't think that James Bond helped him get Knives Out, of course, where he tries to do something different. But I loved the time too when they would put a little bit more stock in teenagers, like a Molly Ringwald, who could open up a movie like Pretty in Pink. John Candy,
John Hughes. I mean,
John Hughes. Yeah, and John Hughes created some stars, and he knew how to work with some, you know, he knew how to work with some actors and actresses. I mean, he had a keen sense for that. But I think we've kind of lost that way. You know, Barbie's an IP. We talked about Margot Robbie a lot because of Barbie, which she is fantastic. And people now, I'm sure, are going to be, oh, Margot Robbie's great. Well, yeah, she's always been great.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like, I always wondered why certain movies that she was in didn't hit, like Birds of Prey.
Right.
I mean, she was fantastic.
Yeah.
As well as all the other women. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is another actress who has, you know, talk about, I give her credit, because you talk about a woman, you talk about a woman who is not afraid to do a genre movie.
Yeah.
And it's her. But her movies haven't like quite hit. She was in a two Die Hard movies, but that wasn't because of her.
She's had a great TV career. So
she's had a great TV career.
Here's what's happening now. So along with the idea that, you know, studios don't want to take risks anymore, as well as, you know, they want to follow tried and true IPs and find new IPs and not, you know, find original thing. I agree with you on that. I mean, the indie film world is still a wonderful place to see those movies that are original, and it's just going to be that way from now on. I think I don't think it's going to change. But what's happened as well is TV has gotten so great and so many different ways of watching that some of those movie stars are going to television. Recognition, but then we're also creating the new stars of television, you know.
And, absolutely.
And I think,
but isn't it funny though, Kit? Because before it was you were on TV in hopes that you could make that leap into movies.
Yep.
You know, you wanted to get big in movies, and now it's like, yeah, I'm in movies, but hey, I can be on TV. They're gonna pay me. I said, look, I got paid a lot of money, and you know, whatever. Who do you think is a movie star of today, excluding all those people that we talked to?
Well, like I said, I think Leonardo DiCaprio kind of ranks up there.
Wouldn't you say though he was created beyond this time, like before? I mean, he could pull
like
in
right now, like a new person. Who do I?
Within the past 10,
it's tough. You know, because you're right. I mean, I think the modern day movie star now is tied to a superhero. It's definitely a big part of it. As far as young up and coming, maybe, you know, maybe a Vin Diesel or
he's been around for a while too. He's tried, but outside of Fast and Furious, his movies tank.
Right.
You know, so
the Riddick movies too. I think he had some cool on those. Yeah, it's kind of hard pressed to think of some.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Chris Pratt, only
Yeah,
because
but let's
but-
see him when he's out of Jurassic World
well,
and
the
Guardians.
Passengers, which didn't do so well, but
No.
I think
Again,
he was good.
yeah, but again, nobody went and saw it. Like, I mean, people like Chris Pratt. It's almost like people like an actor, but when that actor does what they want them to do,
Right.
when they go out of that box, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like Bill Murray. Well, again, Bill Murray, he did Razor's Edge, right? And people were like, well, what's that? But and then somebody like John
Bruce
Belushi
Willis did Bonfires of the Vanities, and that completely.
Well, that killed everybody's career almost, including De Palma's. But yeah, it's just very interesting, and we can talk about Bruce Willis, sad story, but again, that was a guy that could do comedy. He came from TV,
Yep.
and he could do comedy, and he did action, and he did dramas as well. And that's the other thing too. I think the actors, even you said Meryl Streep, they could do it all.
Right.
And they would take the risk. Oh, I want to, you know what? I want to be in a comedy. I want to try that. Oh, you know what? I want to be in a Vietnam War drama. Oh, Kevin Costner. We forgot about Kevin Costner. How do you forget about this guy? Between Bull Durham, his baseball movies, JFK, Robin Hood, all the.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Costner.
I was in love with Kevin Costner.
Who wasn't? No Way Out.
Oh,
I mean, The Bodyguard.
yes.
Right.
Well,
the whole thing on Kevin, the movie was a hit. I mean, the movie was huge.
I know.
So I know that we are running out of time. I want to know, hey, folks, please comment. Who do you think is a movie star today?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk to everybody real soon. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll have some more reviews, and we'll maybe think of some other things to talk about. And until then, Dimitri Panos saying goodbye. Kit, it was awesome. Thank you.
That was great. We could keep talking for hours. Okay.
I know.
All right. Take care,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.